One of the things that I can imagine will be with us much sooner than most people realize is humanoid robots in our homes, helping us with daily tasks, from doing the dishes to reminding us to reminding your geezers to take their pills. And the speed of change, I think that will be one of the next major things that most people that changes people's lives that we'll see in the very near future. This idea of robots living with us in a very real way.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show, the home of Googleization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy, never normal shift going on all around us. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of people, business, and technology. Here is your host, Ira Wolfe.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. Thank you for being part of Googleization Nation. I'm Ira Wolfe. If you think this is just another podcast, think again. This is the voice of the most important conversations on the future of work confronting business, leaders, and people today. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of business, technology, and people. In other words, my goal is to help you make sense of this messy, weird, unfamiliar, fascinating world that we seem to be careening toward. Just a few weeks ago, neuroscientist Jean Gomes visited the show. He described one's mindset as how we make sense of the world. Well, today's guest, Daniel Levine, is obsessed with business trends that he believes also help us make sense of the world. Daniel will join me in just a few minutes. Today's show is brought to you by our good friends at Avanti. Avanti is at the forefront of making everywhere work work. In just a few weeks, Avanti is hosting the Avanti Solutions Summit. There'll be over 70 educational sessions and keynotes, but what I'm most excited about is the release of their 2024 Everywhere Work report. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to share the results right now, but you can join me and the Avanti team on April 10th in Grapevine, Texas for the epic Avanti Solutions Summit. Let's learn a little bit more about the summit and how you can attend.
Avanti Solutions Summit 2024 is just around the corner. Join us in April to shape the future of work together with Avanti. Learn more about this exciting event and register on the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization website. Use code SMIndustryPartners.
And you can keep listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization because over the next few weeks, I will be sharing the results of the Everywhere Work report each week after the summit. Now, as an armchair futurist, a lot of people ask me what my predictions are for the future. Well, I'll be the first to admit I've got no crystal ball. I don't have the ability to time travel. But what I do have is an ability to do a lot of research, to connect the dots, to spot some trends, to find some patterns quicker than many other people, or maybe it's just the volume of research that I do. But, and I'll emphasize, I'm spelling but with a capital B, capital U, and capital T. I can barely hold a candle to our guest today, Daniel Levine. He's the director of Avant-Garde Institute and one of the world's top world trends experts and trend spotters. He's the author of over 20 best-selling books, a frequent guest on international television and radio, and as a consultant, Daniel helps many of the world's top companies understand the future of culture and consumerism. When organizations are looking to see what's coming next, or as he puts it, to see around the corners, they call Daniel. His clients include Microsoft, MasterCard, BMW, McDonald's, and many, many more. His visit today is a perfect example of what it also means to say time flies, because it is almost 5 years ago that Daniel first visited Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. Let me put that in some perspective. That was 9 months before the COVID-19 pandemic. And guess what we didn't talk about that day? A pandemic. What we did talk about was a book called Future Shock, something that futurists Heidi and Alvin Toffler published in 1970, over 50 years ago. And here we are in 2024, and many, many people are experiencing future shock. So we're wondering what trends Daniel is spotting today to make us feel that way, and what opportunities exist going forward. So let's give a big Googlization Nation welcome to Daniel Levine. Hey, welcome, Daniel.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Ira. And, I should say I'm happy you mentioned the crystal ball, because I actually brought mine today. So, yeah, so we can have a good
conversation. Just as a reference, I brought the copy of Future Shock.
Oh, fantastic.
That's the original one, the parchment yellow pages.
So. Yeah, well, it might, first edition, it might be worth something.
It could be. Yeah, it shows my age that it's the original. It's the original version and my copy. So, because many people ask me is, how did you get interested in all this? When did you start following, the future? When did you become a futurist? And I'm not sure I became a futurist, but just looking forward, I always did it from a marketing opportunity, just looking to see what was next on the table there. But again, it's amazing that how accurate that prediction was of, that how many people be experiencing shattering stress and being disoriented by the pace of change as a result of technology.
Well, it seems that way. And even you could drill down to what specifically is making people full of this malaise. And we see, of course, social media is getting a lot of credit for that these days. And it's so interesting to see how especially younger generations are perhaps having some challenges dealing with life in ways that older ones don't, because their heads are in screens so much.
For sure. So there's so many things that we need to talk about. We only have so much time. So let's dig into some of those trends that we're spotting. So, again, 5 years ago, we weren't necessarily, although Bill Gates was predicting, forecasting, I wouldn't say predicting, but forecasting that, we'd had a pandemic at some point, and many other people. We weren't talking about it at that point. But we were talking about the stress that was going to come, and then the pandemic came. So I can imagine that over the last 3-4 years now, actually, we're the fourth year anniversary of COVID, of our lockdown, that your world has really accelerated, and many of the trends that you might have been talking about before are now reality, and maybe some that weren't. So let's talk about where we are.
Yeah, you've done your homework, and you know your stuff, obviously, Ira, because acceleration is exactly the right word. Where all these trends that us experts have been saying will come to fore in some time in the future have been accelerated because of COVID, and we're seeing them happen a lot earlier than many of us thought they would happen.
Yeah, ironically, September of 2019. I gave a presentation to our regional Chamber of Commerce HR groups, and it was a summit, and it was titled Future of Work 2030. And I talked about a lot of the trends, and then 6 months later,
here we
were 10
exactly.
10 years in advance. So there's so many things. I mean, obviously we talk about the future of work, we talk about Googlization, the convergence of people, business, and technology. Let's start with the pandemic. One of the biggest trends has been, a couple things. There's AI, is certainly advanced. So we want to talk about how that's affecting work. But just in general, and again, what Avanti, and you heard us talking about that, and what their summit's about, partly of what their summit is about this everywhere workplace. There's CEOs that are trying to, go back to normal, bring everybody back to the office. What are you spotting? What are you hearing in your research that either confirms or contradicts what their strategy is?
Sure. On an individual basis, of course, we're going to see different companies have different strategies about how they want to work. But if sort of on the overall big picture, we're not putting the genie back in the bottle. We're not going back to everybody working 9 to 5 every day in offices. It'll happen and it is happening, and is so for some people. But in general, in the United States, it's about being more distributed, not less distributed, and people have more opportunities to do their work from home or from resort or from wherever. What might be really interesting, what is really interesting is that there's a feedback loop happening, because the technology that also is coming down the pike is helping reinforce that concept that people can work from places that are not traditional offices. And we're going to see that happen even more and more. And I think of things like Microsoft's HoloLens or other augmented reality glasses, or however they'll come out, where it allows people to be in the same room together, even though they're not physically in the same room. There's a lot of technologies like that, where people can work on the same project, even physically looking at it together as a hologram, and pointing out to each other. Doctors can do this, point out what patients look like. Architects can do this, point out what they're building to other architects who are perhaps even in other countries. And when I look at this and I talk with other people about this, the comment that's often said to me is, yeah, but ultimately we're really just talking about white collar workers with that, because if you're a blue collar worker, you need to be there, actually, right? You have to be in the factory or wherever working. But in fact, there's technology that I've seen that allows people, for example, factory workers, to put on goggles and operate their machinery when they're not necessarily standing next to that machinery. They could be halfway around the world operating that machinery in a factory. So the technology that we'll be seeing in the next few years will really help this snowball effect. That's, as I said, not putting that genie back in the bottle. It's exactly the opposite. Our workplaces will become more distributed on a general basis.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind, and again, this is certainly a white collar job, to some degree. But when I was doing more presentations on the future of work, I showed an image of physicians working remotely, and they were using robots, the Da Vinci devices and things for 20 years now, but they did start to do surgeries remotely. But the challenge was getting that tactile sense, getting that feel. And there was, and this was probably 3 or 4 years ago, so I don't know where the development is right now, but the physicians actually put their hands into a device, and on the other end were sensors. And so the challenge, and having been in the healthcare field and having done surgery, is I understand what they were missing by just doing it functionally, not tactily. And by putting their hands in these sensors and being able to feel where they were able to do it remote. Now, they were clunky, they were big, they were expensive, they were still experimental. I think the thing that listening to you is what people have missed when we talk about, well, in the future, it's like, well, that's not developed yet. There are so many things that are available now, and either going through the approval states or making them more affordable is the only thing that's holding us back. And a lot of times that's the technology itself. As the technology gets better, faster, bigger, we can service that, even moving more toward quantum computing. Quantum computing, not consulting, but quantum computing that's the edge. And it's like overnight, just like ChatGPT, one night something comes onto the scene and all these things in the background seem to take place. Right? I mean, this is what you're spotting, right?
Totally. And what I would add to it is the speed in which it happens. It seems like it's so far into the future until it appears, and then it very quickly becomes ordinary.
Yeah, and your background is perfect for talking about how fast things are happening and anxiety and stress, right?
Yeah, and I think, as you know as well, I don't know if you could. I'm in New York City. I'm hearing like sirens around me.
It's a familiar sound. We were just there last week, so.
But the speed of change is accelerating, and so the next 10 years will be much faster than the last 10 years, and that's something to take into account as well. And maybe that also brings us back to future shock. If speed, is there a limit to how fast speed can accelerate? I mean, we just can't keep up any longer. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, one of the analogies I use, and again, you may have something similar or more accurate, but I'm teaching a class on innovation and entrepreneurship, and I share that with them because here's 18 to 22-year-olds. So to your point in question is, as an older baby boomer, I mean, I'm seeing things accelerate, but what's an 18-year-old going to envision? What's the world going to look like when they're 60 or 70? And one of the things that I talk about, and I just mentioned it, was quantum computing. And again, that seems like so far out there. What people don't realize, it's not like just another advanced processor. It's not like we're going from, it used to be from going to a 286 to a 386 to a gigabyte to a terabyte. It's astronomical. And the analogy that I put together or the metaphor that I put together was that the fastest laptop computer today is the processor is almost 6 gigahertz, and most people are running about 3 gigahertz, so it's about half of that. It's not just double; it's exponential above that. It is once we have quantum computing, it's 178 million times faster that we can process information. It's not an incremental increase. It's not doubling. It's not tripling. Moore's law just goes out the window at that point. And we're, I know they've been saying this. You probably have a better idea than I do, but, it was supposed to be 2020, 2025, 2030. We're just on the verge of quantum computing. But once we have either a version of that, things are going to move so much faster, which is, as I say in my byline on LinkedIn, that's fascinating and terrifying.
It is. And think about, of course, all the things that will be used for. One of the things that I can imagine will be with us much sooner than most people realize is humanoid robots in our homes, helping us with daily tasks, from doing the dishes to reminding your geezers to take their pills. And the speed of change, I think that will be one of the next major things that most people, that changes people's lives, that we'll see in the very near future. This idea of robots living with us in a very real way on an everyday basis.
So let's talk about that. One of the points that you had sent me earlier that you wanted to talk about was robots taking our jobs. And there is a controversy about that. Is that, are they going to take our job? They're not going to take our jobs. They're going to make us better if they're our partners. And certainly, I shut down most of the windows to save some bandwidth. But an hour ago, if you looked at my browser, I probably had 10 to 15 different windows open that had ChatGPT, Copilot, or some other AI program that I'm now using I'm really using as my partner. I get an idea, I throw it out there. What do you think about it? It helps me generate idea. It's my friend. It becomes my partner. And that's the way to use it. But it is replacing people.
Totally. I think the people who are arguing that it's not going to take jobs, I don't really understand that. It obviously will. Maybe, what perhaps these people are talking about is overall, at least in the near term, we're not going to have fewer jobs in general. But specific jobs they're already going by the wayside. And it's amazing to me to see how quickly companies are embracing robotics and AI to replace employees. It's happening now. Specific, think about fast food and self-serve kiosks in a simple, very, very simple version of that. But it's easy to imagine, as I would just mentioned, robotic maids, of course, autonomous vehicles, putting drivers out of business, autonomous forklifts.
They have those now.
It goes on and on. Yeah.
Right.
So, But to your point also, when you're talking about generative AI, and which is not robotics, but that also is, a lot of people are afraid of it, like any new technology, and maybe fear is behind the whole idea of robots taking our jobs also, because some people will be hurt by that. But the fear when it comes to generative AI, we've seen that a lot in schools, teachers talking about how they're afraid, their students are having papers written by ChatGPT or something similar. And I think the best way to look at that is the way you described it. It's a tool in the way that teachers were afraid of calculators when they first came out, and calculators were banned from math class. And now, of course, they're welcomed, and people are being taught how to be even better using this tool. And I think it's exactly the same analogy for something like for generative AI.
Yeah. I'm laughing because when Future Shock came out, and when I got my copy, probably in 71, I was a biology pre-med major, and we had to use a slide rule, which I took the class, and of course nobody knew what it was. And that was just about the time, 72, I think Texas Instruments came out with somewhat of an affordable calculator, and we could use it in class, but we could not use it for our finals. And because it was going to make us stupid and dumb and everything else, and then it certainly advanced to computers, and now we're talking about generative AI and other forms of that. So and working in a college, working in that environment at least 2 hours a week for class, there is a lot of fear. I mean, there's people that are helping the students, and that's my approach to it, is helping them become comfortable with it, knowing how to use it, and not necessarily, as parents have done for years and teachers have done for years, withhold the newest technology, and then as soon as the kids become of age, they go wild on it with no training at all. So my approach has been to help them prepare for it, versus hold it as, no, you have to learn the old traditional way.
So Ira, are you thinking of changing the name of the podcast from Googleization to generative AIization?
I've thought of that. I'm actually trying to create a version of it, but I like the alliteration.
Sure.
And it still works, and Googleization's all encompassing.
No, it's a great name, and Google is not going away. And I'm finding personally that I'm using Gen AI tools so much more as far as a search engine, or perhaps even better stated, a research engine, in ways that I would have gone to Google and search engines before. I'm using Gen AI tools, and thinking that you and I are sort of in the avant-garde, to coin a term, of what the world will be looking at in many ways. I can imagine that people who are watching this show, who are perhaps not using Gen AI tools as heavily as we are, will be doing so in the near future.
So let's go back to the robots a bit. So are there any kind of subcategories of that? I mean, you mentioned humanoids in our houses, possibly as maids and as butlers and helping us there. What other are you seeing other patterns or other trends that we can expect in the next few years to be pretty common?
Yeah, well, I think sort of an overall trend related to robotics and AI is that we're seeing that humans are becoming more expensive to pay and to deal with, and robots are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and AI, as the technology develops. And so what that will be creating in the next few years, and it's already begun, is a bifurcation between high touch being for the luxury end, people who can afford it, who can afford to be helped and work with other human beings, And for everybody else, it's moving towards high tech and being catered to by robots and AI. And we're seeing that across industries, certainly in the travel industry, quite a lot, with hotels. I would say with any industry that has consumer facing possibilities, we're seeing that the luxury end, you look at luxury handbags and shoes, they're still relying on human beings helping other human beings, and that will continue, and in fact become an even more luxurious experience. But for everybody else, it's buy online, click, click, click.
Yep. So let's talk. We began the show with Future Shock, and really it wasn't about it. It was the impact of the technology and the acceleration, and from everything we just have, we have probably have created a lot more frustration and anxiety and stress among people of what the future is going to look like. But it's creating a wellness challenge. I mean, really a health challenge, a mental health challenge in that. And I know that was one of the points that you see as a trend. Is it just going to continue, or are you seeing our approach to dealing with that finally changing?
Well, the whole concept of wellness is one of the biggest trends that we've been seeing for the last few years, and the concept itself has changed. When people originally were thought about wellness, it was fairly narrow. You were thinking about yoga and meditation and physical wellness, and that's really branched out into being more of a holistic wellness about how we are as human beings. As far as our relationships go, as far as caring for ourselves and others, as far as our general mental health that would include spirituality even. It's the whole thing about being a human being. And I think perhaps an easy way to conceptualize that is the last few years, for the last few decades, businesses have been talking about work-life balance as if they're two different things. Work is over here and the rest of your life is over here. And the concept has changed in people's minds, whether they're consciously aware of that or not, that people are now much more concerned about work-life integration. Work is part of your life, and it's just one part of your life. It's not like it's not two different things, work and the rest of your life. Work is an important part of the holisticness of your entire life. And I think we're seeing a lot of workers understand that, perhaps not verbalizing it, but feeling that. And it's why we're seeing workers acting the way they are, as far as leaving work if it doesn't fit into how they conceptualize their life in general. And we're seeing, companies are not stupid. They're answering this by offering their employees more of that work-life integration. And in fact, we even see human resource officers changing their titles to human wellness officers, with that understanding that their job is not just to treat the people who are working for them at their companies as things that can be disposed, but more that they're in charge of the general wellness, and that's the way to attract and retain employees.
Yeah, I mean, generationally, as a baby boomer, and certainly, the generation that preceded me, was a live to work generation, and much more moving, and even beyond this, from a work to live generation, and that's where people like Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis and a lot of the other people that talk about abundance is where we hope technology goes. Is that we in addition to having cleaner water and healthier lives and living longer and doing all those things, that we will have more free time, that we won't have to work as hard, but we will still be able to have a quality of life. That's the ideal version of that, and it seems that we're far from there, but we're incrementally moving.
In fact, Ira, I think in some ways it's moving in the opposite direction, in many ways, because the promise of technology has always been that it will give us more time kick back and chillax. But in fact, the opposite has been is what's happened. And I can think back to when the washing machine was invented, and women who were mostly responsible for doing the laundry at that time. It was marketed to women as if you look at the ads from back then, that you can, boy, you're going to have all this time because you're not going to be spending time to do the laundry. But in fact, what's happened is it's given us, technology has given us more time to be more productive, to do even more stuff. And so I think of think about Gmail's autocomplete feature. You're writing your Gmail and it finishes what you have to say before you even know that that's what you wanted to say. Is that allowing us to end our email, go, okay, I've ended my emails 5 minutes sooner. Now I can, go and do something, go on vacation. No, in fact, what it's done is it's allowed us to write even more emails. And on and on. That's the way that I'm seeing technology. And so what's happening with this idea of work-life integration and people, it's people who are pushing back against that technology, because the technology is marching forward in the way that it does, and it will not be contained unless individuals make that decision to, hey, I'm not going to adopt that technology. And the flip side of that, and the reason why it's so difficult, I think the main reason why it's so difficult to push back on that is because what you're often also saying is, I'm not going to use that technology. I'm going to take more time for myself, and I'm going to perhaps make less money because of that. I could make more money if I was work, go, grab all of this technology. But it's at some point, people are saying, wait a second, that's not healthful for me.
And that tees up one of the things that we definitely want to cover. And speaking about accelerating, I can't believe that 30 minutes went by already, and we have so much more to cover. But certainly want to address what's going on with social media, what's going on with the technology companies, somewhat related to the AI in there. And that has to do with two other topics, about transparency and well, a whole list of things. So we've got a few minutes when we come back, but we're going to take a quick break. You've been listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Got Daniel Levine, one of the world's top trend spotters, and we've been having a fantastic conversation. We will be right back in 1 minute.
Are your employees feeling stuck and just showing up for a paycheck? Is your workforce working harder to get back to normal than adapting to the future? It's time to help them break their addiction to certainty and develop a growth mindset. Developed by one of the world's top-rated future of work thought leaders, AQ Plus Mindset is a powerful tool to help your employees embrace change, adapt faster, and grow on the job. Conveniently delivered to any smartphone or laptop and easy to digest 5 to 10 minute lessons. Managers can sit back and watch employee attitude shift towards growth and innovation in just 30 days. Are you ready to help your employees thrive in this ever-changing, never-normal world? Encourage them to show more grit, resilience, adaptability, and unlock their potential? The journey to a growth-filled future starts with a growth mindset. Visit aqplusmindset.com or call 484-373-4300.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, here with Daniel Levine, from director of Avant-Guide Institute, and one of the world's top trend spotters. And we've been talking about some of the trends that are going on. When we took a break, one of the things that you had just started to talk about was a little about the technology, but also social media. Obviously in the news just yesterday or 2 days ago, Florida instituted a new policy that no one under 14 can use social media. Are we taking a step back? Are we taking a step forward? What are some of the things you see shaping up on that?
Well, specifically with that Florida ruling or law, I suppose, it's really interesting how they're looking to protect children from social media. So there's clearly substantial movement thinking that social media is bad for kids. What's your thought about that?
You know, I had actually in 2008, 2009, I was teaching people how to use in business. That was right after the collapse of the economy. And I was living in Maryland at the time and worked with the community college and the Chamber of Commerce's, and we were offering courses teaching the adults. And that was one of the concerns back then. Certainly there was some adults felt that this was silly and a waste of time. But it was one of those trends that was going to happen anyway. There was no, just like AI, we weren't putting the toothpaste back in the tube, at that point. And then we've had the effects of Facebook and Twitter. It's challenging. My wife just the other day, or when that ruling came out, it was basically, why do kids, why do 14, 12, 8-year-old kids have smartphones?
Yeah.
Again, I think one is we didn't think about it. Just legislatively, these things get way ahead of us, and there's no way to bring them back in. And then parents, teachers, leaders are sort of poo-poo it up front. It's okay. I'm just going to have my child not do it. And they're a lot smarter than you think. So I think a lot of the responsibility falls on the adults to become more knowledgeable, become more aware of what's going on, and to become more responsible what's going on, rather than say we're going to legislate it out, because I don't think the legislation out is going to prevent it.
Right.
It didn't do it with booze in the 1920s either.
Yeah, and it very well may not. And the first thing I saw kids talking about this, where they were saying, well, what about multiplayer games where they're talking to in a way that's a type of social media? Is that going to be outlawed for
gamification?
Kids? Yeah. So we'll see. But I think the overall concept is solid, and for me, that is that we need to use technology and not be used by it, and not just mindlessly adopt everything that they throw at us. And not everyone is capable of making those choices, it seems, especially children. And so I think, protecting children is different than being a nanny state telling adults what they can and cannot do. And so my personal concept about this is that the idea feels like it's in the right place. I don't know if these laws will be effective, or if it's exactly the right way to go. But I'm solidly behind the concept that we cannot just accept anything that technologists throw at us and embrace that. Optimally, for adults, we would be making smart conscious decisions for ourselves. And hopefully parents are good at, knowing what their children can and cannot accept. But as you well know, a lot of adults don't make those decisions for their children, or are not capable of that. So the question is, is it right for the state to step in there?
Yeah, it's ironic that, and again, trying to avoid the politics of this, on the day that the law goes into effect to protect, our young people and children, is that Trump Social goes public. I mean, there seems irony and hypocrisy in that, which leads to a question about transparency. And I know that was one of the topics that you had listed. Certainly be able to voice your opinion, be authentic, say what's on your mind, has led to a sense of populism, racism, discrimination, that people just say now what they were thinking or what they felt restrained for the last, let's say, 50 years. And now it's back in the open. So what is,
right. So, the concept of transparency is something that is definitely being led by social media. And just for your viewers, that idea is that before the internet and social media, it used to be that the information that we had from companies is what they told us about themselves. And since social media, it's their customers are sharing information about that company with other customers. And so from that perspective, there's this transparency into companies that we as customers can see that we never had a view into before. And that has forced companies to be more transparent about themselves and more honest, because if they're not honest and true, they'll be called out pretty quickly by other consumers. And what you're showing really is that trends are not siloed by industry. These trends that we see in one part of our lives, we see in all parts of our lives. And so this idea of transparency is not confined to businesses, but it also, of course, goes into the political sphere and the and that sort of public places where people speak publicly to each other, and it has all these knock-on effects, and some of them are quite positive, and some of them, as you're alluding to, are quite negative as well. But the idea of transparency, like almost every trend we're talking about today, will become even more intense in the next few years. It's the meaning of trends is when you can see a group of people or a concept or an idea or what people are buying moving in a particular direction. And trends have a lot of inertia. And once they start going, they usually get larger and even more intense. And so the idea of transparency, we will all see, is getting more so in the next few years.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for when you want people to be more authentic and honest. Correct? You have to have a thick skin for sure, and learn those stress management skills. Unfortunately, we're approaching toward the end. So there is one question I always like to ask our guests and to get an opportunity is, was there something I didn't ask that you really wanted to share to get out there? Is there a question or something?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, I think what's so interesting about trends and what I love about trends and futurism is I've always been really interested in how we got here. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, of our ancestors, and that's what makes it makes the lives we're living and the place and time where we are. And so I'm fascinated by this topic. I love talking about it. And so I guess the question that I would want to be asked by you is, will you come back and talk with me again soon on this show?
Well, I love that question. That was going through my mind. It's like there's so many other things that we didn't cover, and
there's so much. I feel like we just started the beginning of this.
Yeah. You're welcome anytime. Obviously this is a favorite topic of mine, and you're welcome anytime. Fitting it in between your travel. So
thank you very much.
Do it.
Well,
I'll bring my crystal ball,
and that sounds wonderful. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I love talking about this stuff. You can find my website at daniellevine.com. And as you know, I travel around the world almost nonstop, speaking at conferences and events, helping businesses understand how they can embrace trends to make money and increase sales. So I would love to help any of your viewers as well.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll take you up on that as well, and we'll get you back on again well before 5 years in order to do that and remind them. Before we close, I do have a favorite section, and we call it the lightning round. So kind of threw a couple questions to get them to know about the Daniel Levine, the personal Daniel Levine, the authentic side of him. So one of our favorite questions, by everybody is, who's your go-to band, or what's your go-to type of music?
Before I go on stage in the morning when I'm getting ready, I usually put on the band Boston's first album, which for me,
it's first time ever. That's the first time we've ever had Boston.
I like the drivingness of it, and it gets me going. So. If any of you haven't heard that in a while, try. I think it's just the name of the album is Boston, and it's one of the great rock and roll albums.
Yeah, I'll have to test that. Mine happens to be Santana, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Chicago, big
Sure.
driving percussion groups, a couple other people in there. Next question. If you were a car, what type of car would you be and why?
That's a good question. If I was a car, well, I guess I would be a car that is, it would certainly have a rag top. I would like the top down so I can see the world and have the sun on me. I like a car with a little bit of flash, but I want it to be safe also. And so I love the idea of looking into the future, but only looking into the next 5 or 10 years at what really is going to be, possibilities of really what's going to be. And so similarly, I wouldn't want to be too flashy of a car. I would want to play it safe also. And what exactly would that be? I'll have to look up.
I was thinking of a Volvo, a Volvo with
a Volvo sports car.
Yeah, or a Subaru with the rag top, which seems to defeat the purpose of it.
That's funny.
Unless you're just sitting there, right? So, final question: if there was someone in history that you could meet, who would it be?
Wow, that's a really great question. I would say. At the caution of sounding trite, somebody like Albert Einstein, who I think was, just because it's sort of maybe a commonish answer. I would think maybe it's not.
No,
I don't know.
I'm not sure we've ever had Albert Einstein before. So I was thinking you were going to say Alvin Toffler, but
no. I'm a generalist in a world of specialists, and I really appreciate speaking with specialists and bouncing things off them about the world, learning very specifically about what they're doing and putting that into a wider cultural context. And so somebody like Albert Einstein for me would be incredibly fascinating.
Okay, and I'm not sure that's been. I don't recall him being mentioned.
That's
before.
Funny. I just assumed everyone would want to meet him.
Yeah. So again, I appreciate Daniel, and definitely you have an open invitation. So if there's something that comes up and you want to chat, just reach out, and we'll do our best to get you on. You can reach Daniel at daniellevine.com. It was scrolling across the bottom of the screen. We'll have it in the show notes. Really appreciate you taking your time. Busy schedule. Glad we were able to get you between trips. I want to thank everyone for being part of Googlization Nation. If you haven't joined us yet, please do so. You can go to googlizationnation.com. Extending a special thanks to Daniel and also to Avanti for being our sponsor. And remember to check out Avanti Solutions Summit. You can do that at Avanti.com or on Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization.com. If you haven't subscribed to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, please do so. Leave a review, leave a comment. You can check us out on YouTube or any of the most popular, or almost all the popular podcast platforms. And remember, until next time, don't let the shift hit your plans.
Thanks for watching Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Be sure to listen to the podcast and follow us on YouTube. This show was produced and edited by Hilton Productions.